Our last action, we've had a demo at the Japanese embassy, the Korean embassy. Our last action was actually this time last week. The UN General Secretary Ban Ki-moon came to London to speak to 2,000 people, and we had a kind of quick ad hoc demonstration that has achieved some fame in Korea. Yes. My wife Debbie and Alice here and a few others held placards outside and recreated the famous statue, and it's quite good because 2,000 people filing in, every one of them saw this, and I got a ticket, and I had my little bits of card and jumped up, and it was just a photo opportunity, but a photo and a short video thanks to my collaborator Jason Vernon in the front here, that's been widely shared in Korea. So I'm going to be signing autographs afterwards. But anyway, the real attraction for this evening, very honoured that Dr. Maki Kimura is here. I met Maki last year when the victim survivor Kim Bok-dong, a 90-year-old former comfort woman, now a human rights activist, came to London and gave 2 talks, and I met Maki and some other people there. I'm very honoured that she's agreed to come and talk to us. Maki is a lecturer at University College London, and she's the author of this book, Unfolding the Comfort Women Debates. And her research centres on the way this is discussed historically, why it's been an issue difficult to talk about, why it's ignored by both politicians and the news media. And it's a reassuringly expensive book because it's
my fault.
because it's an academic work, so you might be able to find it in your library. If it's not there, you just bang your fist on the table and say, what kind of library is this? Get this on the shelves now. Yes, so the full price is around £60. There is a leaflet here if you'd like to get a copy of 30% off. £44 comes down to, and if you say that very quickly, it sounds less. £44 is, well, you know, what's that? That's just a sort of, you know, a romantic dinner for 2. Just have a microwave meal and buy this book. So without further ado, I'd like to invite Maki Kimura to talk. There'll be time afterwards for a Q&A. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for coming tonight. As Andrew said, it's Friday night, and I'm pretty sure there are lots of other things that you could do, but I really appreciate so many of you are here. And also, thank you very much for excellent introduction that Andrew gave, because I was really struggling because what kind of message that I want to sort of deliver today, and exactly how Andrew explained, or the way that Andrew gave the context of how this group came about and why I'm invited here, sort of summarize what I really wanted to say tonight. So one thing that I really want to highlight tonight is how we should understand this issue of comfort women, or the system of comfort women. And what I really want to argue is, because this system is very maybe unique, and the extent of victimization is so huge. So we tend to think that this is one isolated system which happened in Asia. But what I really want to highlight today is we really need to understand this kind of victimization in the context of war and militarism, as well as how modern states has been sort of constructed. So I really want to see and sort of link this issue with what's happening now in different parts of the world, maybe in Syria, or maybe even somewhere in East Asia around the military base, how women has been sexually exploited still today. So this is something I really want to talk about. But first, to begin my talk, I also want to highlight that this word comfort women. And many of you, as you know, this word comfort woman is a euphemistic term to to me Japan's military sexual slavery during the Second World War. And even though that we use this word comfort women, I also want you to understand that many women, like many victims, actually reject being called comfort women, partly because their experience is far from what comfort means. Yes, and it's really, really insulting to call them comfort women if what they had to go through is extreme opposite of comfort. But at the same time, some victim survivors reject this word, partly because comfort women sort of have some implication of implication of military prostitute. So obviously some victim survivors really want to distance themselves from prostitute or military prostitute, so they don't want to be called comfort women. But having said that, I still use this word just to make sure that we are talking about this historical specific system of comfort women. But please imagine that when I utter the word comfort women, I'm using with is inverted commas. So just please visualize this inverted commas when you hear this word. So I actually because many of you here to listen to the talk on comfort women, so I assume that you are familiar with something about comfort women. So I just want to start with true and false questions, but I'm not going to tell you the answers now. But I'm really hoping by the end of my talk that you have got all the answers for these questions. So the first one is comfort women are referred to Korean women who became the victim of sexual slavery by the Japanese military during the Second World War. True or false? Okay. And the second one is Japanese government has never admitted its involvement in the comfort women system. True or false? And the third one is in Japan, the comfort women issue cannot be publicly discussed, or like no one talks about comfort women issue in Japan. And the next one is victims of the comfort women system were all kept in so-called military brothels. And the next one is no one knew about the comfort women system before Kim Hak-sun came forward to testify in 1991. And the last two questions, the Asian Women's Fund, which I'm going to explain later, compensated the victim survivors. And the last one, no official documents about the comfort women system exist because the Japanese government destroyed them before the end of the war. So I hope that you have got some answers to some of the questions, but maybe some questions you might not show, or you might not have a definite answer. So I'm really hoping that you would have, you would find some answers in my talk. So firstly, I want to talk about, want to give some overview picture of comfort women system and the history of the debate. So as many of you know, that Kim Hak-sun is the first publicly known Korean comfort woman who gave testimony in 1991. And then after her testimony sort of is known in different parts of the world, many women from countries including South and North Korea, Taiwan, the Philippines, Holland, Malaysia, China, Indonesia, and East Timor also came forward and testified in public. So I really wanted to highlight when we talk about comfort women, partly because organization in South Korea is most organized to support, to have like better support for victim survivors. So they are most known sort of victim survivors. But I really want to you to understand that when we talk about victim survivors, they come from all different countries. So to highlight this, I just wanted to show a short video clip from Women's War Crime Tribunal, which took place in 2000, and you can really see the diversity of victim survivors.
The entire hall was filled with excitement. The joy of the survivors was especially moving.
So this is when they
There was
had
great
just,
significance
so
in
all these
finding
are
anyone guilty
victim
of
survivors.
and People's Tribunal supported by global civil society. In doing so, the tribunal opened a new path toward a nonviolent 21st century. In our search for a society free of violence, we will continue to march with the women of the world.
So I hope that you could see the diversity of victim survivors from different countries. And also not only these victim survivors come from other countries than South Korea. I also wanted to highlight that Korean victim survivors also live in other countries outside South Korea. So there are victims in Japan, North Korea, China, and Thailand who are actually originally from Korea. And Korean photographer and Sihon actually take a photograph of Korean comfort women who are left behind in China. And he's a quite famous photographer in Japan and I think in South Korea as well. So he went to China and realized that there are lots of victims who never managed to go back to South Korea. And that, as I said, that there are other victims who are originally from Korea who couldn't go back because of all sorts of reasons. And these women can be found in Japan or obviously in Thailand and in other parts of Southeast Asia. One of the examples of this woman is actually Soshindo, who's been living in Japan after the war, and she's a very famous victim survivor in Japan. Okay. So. The first comfort station, which can be identified by so-called official document, was established in Shanghai in 1932. And comfort women, actually since then, the comfort women spread all over Japanese colonies and occupied territories in East and Southeast and Pacific Asia. So sorry that it's not very clear, and also it's in Japanese. But basically, this is Japan, and this is the Pacific Asia. So red sort of highlights where comfort stations were based on testimonies of victims, and then the blue one. The blue one sort of indicates comfort station, which is based on soldiers' testimonies, and the yellow one are the concept of comfort station, which can be identified in official documents, and then the green triangle are based on witness testimonies. So you really can see the extent of the victimization as well as the spread of comfort station all over Pacific Asia. So obviously this is something which is very much contested, but exact number of victims is still unknown, and obviously the full extent of victimization is yet to be uncovered. Obviously because Kim Hak-sun came forward as a first known comfort woman. So the research started from the victimization of Korean women, but then Taiwanese women came forward as victims, as well as Filipino women. So there are increasing number of women came forward from different countries. So we still don't know the full extent of the victimization of this system. And also another thing I wanted to highlight is in many articles of mass media, particularly Western media, comfort women are often referred to as mutual brothels. And if you hear the word mutual brothels, you tend to think that all these women are kept in brothels, which is very organized with some kind of regulations. But a lot of researchers actually look into these issues, and now various studies identified different types of comfort stations in Japanese colonies and occupied territories and conflict zones. So for example, in Chinese cities and mainly in big cities, comfort stations were often run privately as more systematically organized mutual brothels. But in rural areas of China and Southeast Asia, like somewhere like Philippines, closer to front lines of battlefield, women were often abducted by Japanese mutual and or their local collaborators, and they are imprisoned for a period of time and repeatedly raped. So they have got quite different forms of comfort stations. And sort of in between, there were also comfort stations run by Japanese military or have contracted to private businesses, but also still controlled by the military. So you really need to understand there's also a diverse form of comfort station. So what I also wanted to highlight, based on these kind of diverse forms, women's experience were diverse and they were often influenced, and these kind of experience were influenced by where and when they were forced to become comfort women. So why did I become interested in the issue? And often, like I'm being asked, like why when I was doing my PhD, and on this issue, that I often get questioned, why am I interested in this topic? So by the time that I start to look into this issue, which was like in middle of 1990s, there has been a quite big and heated debate taking place in Japan. But at the same time, I was really interested in this topic because this is a feminist issue, like issues around gender inequality and gender violence. But at the same time, I started to be really curious why, there are so much tension between like feminists and like right-wing people in Japan. So I wanted to explore why, what is the source of this kind of like conflict. So I started to look into these issues as a sort of initial research project, and then had very, very interesting experience. So when I set to told what I was looking at as my potential research topic, one of visiting scholar from Japan said actually she has got someone who has got whose father was sort of involved in conflict women system, and she said she can just introduce me to this lady. So I thought, oh, this is a really good experience, and then I went to see this lady without knowing much about this lady. I knew about her father, who was a doctor, who sort of examined some of the comfort women during the war. And then when I arrived and had a meeting with her, after 10 minutes, I started to be uncomfortable, to be honest, because I just realized that I don't share a view with her, and she had more right-wing inclination. so I mean, obviously, some of you are students, so I really shouldn't say that. You really shouldn't lie to your research participant. So I didn't want to say that I share her view. So what I did is just I keep quiet about my view, and I just listened to her, and so I didn't lie. But then, so I feel really, really uncomfortable. But at the same time, I just realized, so in a way that I always thought that I never share any view with like people who have got right-wing inclination. But at the same time, through this kind of exchange, I really could see why she sort of have that particular view. And I also have to say that she's not like a monster, or she's not heartless. And actually she's very genuine, and she was very welcoming, and she was really concerned about social issue. So in a way, it was really curious. I was really curious, like why someone who can be very social conscious and very caring can support. So that is something I thought maybe it's something quite interesting to look at. And the second incident that I had in my initial phase of research is I tried to go to various events or to go to talks by either victim survivors or maybe by soldiers. So I went to one of these talks by this soldier who again happened to be a military doctor, and he went to China as a doctor. But after the war, that he was captured by Chinese authority and was sent to educational center and was kept there for about 3 to 4 years. And then during that period, he need to spend time to reflect what actually he did during the war. So by that time he was released, that he had full understanding what Japanese government did and how he was involved in this kind of atrocity that Japanese military did. So he and other people who was kept in this re-education center became sort of advocate for peace, and they organized various events to talk about their experience. So I went to one of these talks, and then I approached him and asked him if I can have a word with him in person, which we did. So by that time, I read his memoir, and obviously I went to his talk in a public talk. So I sort of knew, what he did in terms of, so he was involved in human experiments, and also he examined comfort women. So that is what he said in his public talk as well as in memoir. And he said that he actually went to comfort station to have sex with comfort women. But during our conversation, he actually said that he didn't visit comfort station. And he said a lot of his colleagues went to her comfort station, visited the comfort station, but he said he didn't. So I thought, that is very interesting. So I thought, and then I thought it's quite interesting to look at this kind of dynamics of testimony. And I'm not saying that he lied to me, but I thought it was really interesting to look at how testimony can work in different contexts. So these kind of things became a really interesting topic for me. And at the same time, when I tell others that I'm interested in this topic, one of the things that I was being asked is, are you going to do the interview with victim survivors? And then I thought about that and the possibility, but at the same time, I decided not to, partly because maybe language limitation. Unfortunately, I don't speak any other Asian language. But obviously, I could interview a woman who can speak English, but I thought that might be a bit problematic. But at the same time, by that time, there's a lot of testimonies as published materials as well as visual images being sort of circulated in public sphere. So I thought that I can use that kind of materials. But at the same time, I was really concerned about how interviews are being conducted. So obviously, we really want to listen to these women's experience. So these women are bombarded with people who wanted to have interview with them. And initially, these women were eager to talk because they really want to share what happened to them. But at the same time, by the time I started to do my own research, they start to feel a bit tired of sharing their experience, because initially they thought that if they talk about their experience, something changed. But not much has changed. Not much. Some of the changes that they expected didn't happen. So I thought it might be a bit problematic to speak to them just for my own research when they start to feel that there's nothing that they can get in return. So that's why I became more interested in looking at how these issues being discussed, and as I said, the power of testimonies and how we can understand comfort women, victim survivors' testimonies. So when we talk about issue of comfort women, we can see various views on victim survivors and this system. And obviously the first one, which you might be most familiar with is Japanese nationalist or like revisionist discourse. And these kind of like people claim that they were mutual prostitutes and they worked voluntarily, they became like a prostitute voluntarily, and they worked under the private business and they earned money, and because they worked under the private business, the Japanese government is not directly involved in the system, so that Japanese government is not responsible. So that is sort of like extreme. And obviously this kind of voice is quite strong, unfortunately, in Japan. And then, if you look at the Japanese government's view on comfort women, and particularly since 1993 corner statement. Obviously before this corner statement, Japanese government sort of denied any involvement in the operation, its government's involvement in the operation of comfort women. But in 1993, Chief Cabinet Secretary Kono Yohei actually admitted Japanese involvement in the operation of the system, and also he admitted some level of coercion was used in recruiting women and also in comfort stations. And the following year, something called the Asian Peace and Friendship Fund, which is often called Asian Women's Fund, was established. And this was a sort of like public-private initiatives, but subsequently. So I think there was a goodwill both in the government amongst Japanese public during that time, but actually this caused a huge controversy and divided the comfort women movement. So this is because this fund tried to provide and actually provided what is called atonement money, which is not like compensation, but like what is like often referred to as provisional compensation to victim survivors. But this money did not come from governmental budget, but actually from private contribution and donations. So the government pays some money towards this fund, but this money was used to provide health and welfare to support victim survivors. So the money is not directly paid to these women, but actually to the government to run this kind of support. So obviously this is far from compensating women individually. So many women in South Korea, as well as in other countries, refused to accept the money because they thought that this is not an official apology and a compensation. So in summary, Japan, even though that they admitted some involvement, but they never fully admitted its legal responsibility. They never actually admitted that they committed a crime against these women. So Abe Shinzo, going back to what happened December last year. So Abe Shinzo is actually the grandson of the war criminal. So obviously that's why he sort of is very right-wing. So since he became prime minister, so this is his second running of prime minister. But since he, even like from the first time, he tried to withdraw this corner statement because he thought, obviously because he's a war criminal, grandsons of a war criminal, he really didn't think, Japan did any wrong to these women. So in a way, from that point, that it was quite interesting that he clearly stated the Japanese government's responsibility and expressed his sincere apologies and remorse as a Prime Minister of Japan to these women in this Korean-Japan agreement in December. But that is nothing different from Kono's statement. So he never, he didn't admit Japan's legal responsibility to these women. So that's why this Korea-Japan's state the agreement in December was very, very problematic. So I just talked about Japanese nationalist and revisionist discourse and Japanese government's view, and of course we shouldn't forget feminist discourse. So feminists argue that victims are forced to become comfort women, in opposition to what Japanese nationalists argued. And these women are different from military prostitutes. They also argue that comfort women system is different from military prostitution and the licensed prostitution that Japan had during the time. So they argue that the comfort women system is very much unique to Japan. And because it's very much unique to Japan and Japanese government is directly involved in comfort women system, they argue that Japanese government obviously have responsibility to have these comfort women. But I just wanted to highlight the problem of this distinction between military prostitutes versus victims of comfort women. So this kind of the discourse sort of highlight victims can be, women can be only victims if they are sort of innocent virgins. So what happens to like military prostitutes? So we also need to highlight a lot of prostitutes under Japan's licensed prostitution during that time was sent to battlefield or near the near war zone because they didn't have choice, and because they are sent to these places, they also experienced similar had similar sort of experience of sexual violation as other women who we call comfort women. But because initially the discussion was set up around this kind of dichotomy between military prostitute versus victims of comfort women, obviously some women who had slightly different experience are excluded from being recognized as victims. For example, Kim Hak-sun, who is trained as kisen, obviously kisen, they are not a prostitute, but often people see some kind of association between like entertainers and comfort women, entertainers and prostitutes. So when she came forward and when a lot of media reported her experience, her being kisen was not reported. And at the same time, other example is Gil Won-ok. So she turned up to give her testimony in front of Korean Council, and the member of Korean Council and researcher who associate with Korean Council. And the people who actually listened to her testimony had a bit of problem initially, because she said that she was trained as a kisen first, and she said she was sold into prostitution. And they made a sort of like a decision that her testimony should be included in the testimonies of victims of comfort women. But these kind of examples sort of highlight that some women who had gone through similar experience actually are not included as the victims of comfort women. So you can think easily by the 1930s, Japanese licensed prostitution actually spread all over Japanese colonies and occupied areas. So that means that many of these women who actually were like prostitutes under this system eventually forced to become comfort women. But actually there were not many women who came forward, even though that we can assume there must be quite a lot of women who became comfort women through this kind of path. So because these kind of like dividing into two categories of victims between like military prostitutes and victims of comfort women can be problematic, some feminists start to argue that we need to understand comfort women system as the extension of Japanese modern licensed prostitution. By claiming this, I really want to highlight that I'm not saying that victims of comfort women are prostitutes, but I really want to highlight that how women, particularly from lower socioeconomic class or like from particular race and ethnicity, become the victim of exploitation in modern society. And also claiming this kind of a link between Japanese modern licensed prostitution and comfort women also highlights how Japan's licensed prostitution, which often being referred to as a traditional, is not actually traditional, but like modern invention. So if you look at Japanese licensed prostitution, which actually developed in late 19th century, it's developed based on so-called like Western model, particularly like French model. So the difference between what is called, obviously Japan had a long history of licensed prostitution, which can go back to maybe 12th or 13th century. But this is quite different from modern counterpart, because modern counterpart has been redesigned to sort of support the military, like modern military. So when Japan became trying to modernize, and obviously they sort of restructure their military system, one of the concerns that they had, as well as in other countries, is how to prevent the spread of the needle diseases. So the prostitution, and then so to medically examine prostitute became one of the most important work of the government. So that can be, that was the case in other countries like France or Britain or other European countries. So Japan, when it modernized and opened the country, learned this system through like France or like Britain. And maybe the good example of this kind of like modern licensed prostitution can be found in Britain. If you look at Contagious Disease Act, which were introduced in the late 1990s. So as I said, that in this kind of act, the focus was comparatively health checks of prostitutes, not the people who actually visit a prostitute, but prostitutes were forced to have medical checks. And this is what Japan sort of introduced when they reorganized their licensed prostitution. And similar examples can be found in the US and as I said, in other European countries. And particularly if you look at for the occupied, the colonies in Asia and Africa, you can clearly see like this kind of system was in place. But as I said, that I really want to again highlight that by sort of highlighting other examples of licensed prostitution in other parts of the world does not mean that I'm trying to claim that drawing on this kind of other example, Japan can be exempt from taking legal responsibility of corporate women's system. But I just want to highlight the extent of the exploitation of women in modern society, and particularly in militarism. And also by highlighting this kind of links, I also want to argue that Japan has responsibility to demonstrate its leading role to reveal this kind of modern exploitation of women, and also have to take responsibility for that. So obviously, when we talk about comfort women, the victim survivors' voice is really, really important. And But I mean, a lot of people think that we really didn't know about this system until Kim Hak-sun came forward. But this is not the case. Actually, there's a lot of documents you can find which reveal that the US knew that Japan had a comfort woman system, because towards the end of the war, Japan, US military captured some soldiers as well as Korean comfort women, and they actually documented that they were. I think that the recognition was military prostitute, but like Korean military prostitute. So that is clearly written in US documents. And also in 1948, during the Batavia trial, 13 Japanese soldiers were prosecuted for forcing Dutch women into prostitution, forced prostitution in Java Island. But obviously, during that trial, the victims were just Dutch women, like Western women, and they really didn't care about the victimization of Asian women. And a lot of soldiers who came back from war actually wrote about conflict women, and also in the memoirs. But so there are sort of awareness of these women, but actually the assumption is, even though that they had really a difficult time, that these are just unfortunate victims of war, where we can find military prostitution and rape. And at the same time, some women actually tried to talk about their experience before 1990s. For example, like Bai Bong-ki, who is a Korean comfort woman, who lived in Japan since the end of the war, was filmed in 1970s. So there was an awareness that there were victims of comfort women. And also like So Shindo, that was quite well known in her local community as someone who went to the war. And another Korean comfort woman, Wang Kumiju, also talked to one of the researchers that she tried to raise this issue before Korea and Japan signed the agreement in 1965. So she managed to speak to then First Lady, Mrs. Park, and she said Wang Kumiju actually told Mrs. Park that trying to tell her experience of having been comfort woman. But after hearing her experience, the First Lady actually said that it is really unfortunate and that she feels really sorry for her, but Japan and Korea need to move on, so she was being advised not to tell anyone about her experience. And similarly, Chinese victim survivor Yuan Zhulin went to the police station after she saw someone who actually had deceived her and sent her to comfort station. She went to police station because she want this person to be arrested. But actually what happened is, instead of this person being arrested, the rumor spread in her neighborhood that she was a comfort woman and she was considered as a Japanese collaborator. So even though, so these women tried to talk about their experience before 1990s, but their suffering were never heard. So this is what Yang Yuna actually called the cartel of silence. So there are lots of women who try to talk about their experience, but before 1990s, I know no one actually listened to these women. So this is something which exactly happened in December. So these women are forced to become silent. So what I wanted to highlight is, these victims didn't break their silence suddenly in 1990s, but actually, the society became ready to listen to their voices. So these victim survivors' testimonies obviously became very important to reveal the nature and extent of the comfort woman system. Because there was assumption that no government official document survive to sort of reveal comfort women's system. So a lot of feminists start to look at these victim survivors' testimonies as a historical truth. But revisionists start to point out some of the discrepancies in victim survivors' testimonies. So I just wanted to show you some of the examples. Can you share, maybe two people share? So if you, I have got two examples, and the capital A and B and lowercase a and b are from the same woman. But if you can just have a quick read and see if you find any differences in these testimonies.
It was really interesting when you said that the testimonies need to be understood as intersubjective process, because I follow North Korean testimonies, and there were cases where some of the testimonies, well, some held back some facts. So with that in mind, how do you then analyse or take out facts from different parts of testimonies?
Yeah.
What's your approach to it?
Yes, obviously, I think, this is not my approach, but one of, actually, I think it was Professor Shioshimi who actually said that, you can compare different testimonies, and then maybe not just compare, but you also need to contextualize. For example, as I show that, if you compare to testimonies, you really need to think about in what context that testimony is made, and then by comparing and taking that into account, you might need to sort of extract fact. But at the same time, that can also be problematic, because in a way, by just trying to extract so-called fact, you might be actually ignoring what these women actually really want to say, because a lot of feminists argue that a lot is said in silence. Not actually what is said is truth. So that's the difficulty. Yes. So one of the arguments the feminists made, particularly who worked quite a lot with these victim survivors, actually said, obviously we are talking about sexual violence and sexual exploitation, but a lot of, particularly like Korean victims survivors, never said that they're being raped, because that word did not exist. I'm not saying that that does not exist, but that kind of vocabulary is not what they can use. But by not using that and being silent about the experience of being raped is telling more than what they actually express. So it's really difficult, because by extracting what so-called truth, we are not really listening to what they really want to hear. Yeah. You feel very embarrassed to talk about his experience to someone, a young woman like me, and in a way that I really interpreted that as he really didn't want to tell me, even though that he knew that I knew that he went to comfort station, but he didn't really want to tell me in that spot, even though that we had some kind of understanding that he went to. So in a way, they really need to understand testimony as an intersubjective process. So it's not just telling what is truth and what actually happened. And also we need to understand that testimonies as cultural production. So obviously some of you have got the language skills, but still, you not everyone actually speaks to victim survivors directly. So you engage with victim survivors' testimony through maybe like recorded testimonies, or maybe through books. So these kind of testimonies are have gone through different production processes, through maybe the transcribing, editing, and for some people who don't speak Korean or Chinese or other languages, translation. So that also means that we are not sure what we are actually listening to. And one example that I can give you again is I was reading one of the victim survivors' testimony, and she was explaining how she was being taken. And one her testimony that I read actually said that she was taken because she embroidered morning glory around Japanese map. So she upset the authority, so that's why she was taken to the police station. But then when I was looking at other materials, actually this morning glory wasn't morning glory. Actually, it was said the Rose of Sharon, which is quite different. So Rose of Sharon is Korean national flower. So the first case can just understood that the authority was upset because there was a lack of respect to cherry blossom, which needs to she should have used around Japanese map. But then if you actually understand this flower as a Rose of Sharon, maybe she was captured because she was considered as a nationalist. So you can this kind of cultural as well as language translation really highlights how we can understand testimonies differently. So just I'm aware of the time. So obviously Japan hasn't really admitted its legal responsibility, and that is something that needs to be achieved. But at the same time, unfortunately, it took like 25 years. But there have been some achievements that these victim survivors and activists made. Obviously, because of these women's voices of suffering, now there's a recognition of sexual violence as a crime against humanity in the international community. And also there's a strong development of transnational feminist activism, which actually is being highlighted by this International War Crime Tribunal, which took place in 2000. This tribunal is a people's tribunal, but they just wanted to offer the opportunity to bring justice in the absence of any state or international prosecution of those who are responsible. And unfortunately, Japanese Supreme Court turned down appeals for all conflict women lawsuit by 2010. But damage suffered by victim survivors were acknowledged in lower court judgment, at least. So there has been some kind of recognition in legal system, even in Japan. Okay. And obviously there's development of research on conflict women system. Some of you may have heard the name of Professor Yoshimi Yoshiaki and Hayashi Hirofumi. These are the people who has been working on this issue as like lifetime research. And there's been a lot of museums and memorials built in all over the world. And obviously conflict women's statues in front of Japanese embassy in South Korea. And you can also see other memorials all over the world. And this one is in the States, and that is the Museum of Women and Human Rights in South Korea, and something also equivalent in Japan. So there are some kind of achievements, progress, but justice needs to be met by Japan admitting its legal responsibility. So going back to true and false questions, I hope that you now can answer all these questions. So the first one, conflict women refer to Korean women who became the victim of sexual slavery by the Japanese military during the Second World War. True or false?
False.
Yeah. What is wrong with this statement? Yeah, we want the story clear. Yeah. So women of different nationality and ethnicity became victims, and Japanese government has never admitted its involvement in the conflict women system. Again. true or false? This can be a bit problematic and false. Yes. So it did admit it, some involvement, but the problem is it never admitted the central role it's played and also its legal responsibility, which is quite big difference. And in Japan, the comfort women issue cannot be publicly discussed, or like no one talks about the comfort women issue in Japan.
Of course.
Yes. So there are quite strong feminist movements, which I also wanted to highlight. I mean, obviously, unfortunately, school textbooks do not make reference to comfort women, but a wealth of resources are available. For example, the one of the museum that I showed, they run a lot of exhibitions for children. So school, there are a lot of school children actually visit these kind of museums to learn about the issue of comfort women. And the victims of comfort women system were all kept in military brothels. Yes. Yeah. So victims suffered from all forms of violence, but they experienced violence because they are kept in different types of comfort stations. No one knew about comfort women system before Kim Hak-sun came forward to testify in 1991. Yes, so everyone knew, not everyone, but I mean many people knew about, but actually they didn't listen or they didn't actually problematize their suffering. Yes. So Asian Women Fund compensated the victim survivors. False, yes. They provided what is called atonement money, which was refused by victim survivors as it was not considered as official compensation because that didn't come from government budget. No official documents about comfort women system exist because Japanese government destroyed them before the end of the war. Yes, actually, more documents is being discovered by these named professors, and also you can find documents in U.S. archives as well as in somewhere like Australia, like Allied Force. So there are a lot of studies on these kind of documents. So this is what I really want to highlight today, and I'm really happy that you can answer all these questions. So if you have got any questions, that I'm happy to answer. Thank you for listening.